welcome. We're at the Henry Carter Hall Library. It is Thursday, October 7th, 2021. This is The Stories That Veterans Tell. And I'd like to welcome today William Huggins, who is here to tell us about his adventures and his service to our country in World War II. And I have to ask, how did you, when did you go into the service, Bill?
42.
42. And you were in college at the time?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
Well, as we were, being young men in college, we talked about these things, and I was in the, what do you call it, the Army where they have you in,
Like ROTC?
ROTC.
Okay.
I was in the ROTC at college, and there were 3 or 4 of us that were getting, should we be here? Should we be there?
There must have been a lot of really tough decision making about that.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Especially after I worked so hard to get into college.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, to make the story short, as I say, I did decide to go. Signed up with the understanding that I would be in the Signal Corps.
Okay.
Okay, well, when I was called up, I went into the Signal Corps. However, at that time, the Signal Corps were not interested in the things that I was interested in.
Oh, okay.
They needed desperately to have a line crews to rebuild the damaged pole lines, that sort of thing.
Good. Now, this was overseas, this was through France, through Europe?
Well, yes, what it amounted to, you see, when the Germans moved back, one of the most important things they did, there were 2 major things that they took care of as the Americans, or as the Allies moved in.
Yes.
At that point, they damaged every form of signals, for instance, telephone wires, all sorts of cables, that kind of thing. And then they went one step further. If they had the time, they would knock down all the poles.
Okay.
And their poles were concrete, they were not wooden.
Really? Oh, whoa.
Yes, they were concrete. Ugly looking things, rather nasty to climb, but nonetheless, what they wanted to do was to train us to place all the lines that were missing. Sometimes we had nothing but a spool of wire on our back if we were close to the front. Because if they were, for instance, if a certain area the Germans had moved out and we were aware of this, then what they would do, they would get a team like ours.
Yeah.
And this team usually was composed of somewhere between 11 and 19 men, depending on the large capacity required. So at that point, yes. Anyway, I'm going to abridge this now and take us, I think, probably to Echt in Germany.
Okay, and whereabouts in the country? Near the borders of?
Well, Echt is in Germany.
Yeah, but is it closer to France? Is it closer to?
Well, it was well into Germany.
Okay.
Well into Germany. But to make the story short, it's so long ago, I have to think about this. This is over 70 years ago.
Yes.
And up here, it's because of the nature of being there, I was anxious to forget the whole show when I came home.
Yeah.
I no bragging, as I told my family, I'm here, we're not going to talk about war. I'm home, you wouldn't want to hear what I've seen, and as a consequence, I'll take my uniform off, and I'm not out of shame, but I won't wear it again.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
Had
Yeah.
enough. I'd had
Yes.
enough, too much. But anyway, in this particular instance, they waked me one morning, about, I don't know, some 4 o'clock in the morning or so, which was not uncommon. And they said, put your men together, you've got to go up to Echt. And there was a pencil that was not a regular road book.
Yeah,
So what they had done is sketched out as best as they could that there was a meeting in this place and get up there. Okay, and there's a pencil drawing, which wasn't the most accurate. Anyway, off we went, got the men out, and lined up, and off we went. And a little bit of food. You never got too much.
Yeah.
And
were you the officer in charge?
pardon?
Were you the officer in charge?
I was the sergeant.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in charge of this squad.
Okay,
They,
how far did you have to go?
it probably took us about 3 hours to get to Echt. This was with 3 trucks.
Okay,
Loaded with men and equipment, and not being totally, no one filled us in or filled me in on what was really going to happen. It's just, you gotta go to Echt, get up there and get the line
Yeah.
systems working again. They're in troubles.
when you were passing in the trucks, what were you seeing? Was there a lot of destruction from what had preceded, your
Well,
going?
No, there were many times you didn't see that much destruction unless you got near the cities.
Okay.
Generally in the regular countryside, it was rather nice sometimes. It was very nice. But you had to be cognizant of a lot of things.
Yeah,
Something can be very nice. For instance, what was always done, when the Germans backed out, they would just take the road, the roadsides and rotate them.
oh my goodness,
They
so,
rotate them usually 90 degrees.
Degrees.
And at that point, you would make the wrong
Turn.
turn. That if you went down that road, you didn't live more than maybe half an hour.
oh, whoa, yeah,
They were waiting for you. So these are the things, and when you had a pencil map, you had to be deeply concerned,
right,
because you don't want to go down that road.
Right.
And there's no way for us to know.
yeah,
Yeah, using a compass is helpful, but if the road goes this way to get that way, the compass is useless.
Right.
So you just take your chances.
Right.
Anyway, we got to Echt. We came in, we were approaching the area. I was looking at my piece of paper, trying to figure, I hope we've got this right. And my truck driver, I was up with the first truck driver, and I was sitting in the cab, and suddenly he hits the brakes, blows the horn, stops, and he signaled first to the, with red lights
Yeah.
that indicate and slow the men down in the trucks. And the next thing he did, once the vehicle had stopped, is he leaned over and he pulled out his machine gun, which was in a slot beside him. And I said, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
I looked up, we were surrounded totally by Germans.
no, in other vehicles and so forth?
No,
On
no,
foot?
they were all just, there were many, many Germans
Oh.
standing around us. And my first shot was, we've had it. I just said to Gitzig, my truck driver, I said, just scream back to the guys, no shooting, just sit. Because it would have been hopeless. I mean, these are the first thoughts you have.
Yeah,
And then, almost at that point, an Oberleutnant, he's a German officer, walks over, looks up at the side of the truck, and he says, hey guys, how you doing?
in English?
So I look at this guy, he says, yeah, he says, I'm from Chicago. He said, my mother and father were living in Germany and they ordered me back. from the States.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
he said, I was in the German army. I had little or no choice.
Whoa, so then,
Anyway, at that point, you know, I was upset because I thought, we've had it.
yeah,
And so I got down out of the truck, and I said to him, well, and I looked around and I said to Gitzig, my driver, I said, these guys have all been hit. They've got slings and crutches, and at first instance, you don't register on that, you register
true.
on the wrong uniform at the right time.
and the number of people there.
Yeah, and there must have been, hard to say really, but there had to be as many as maybe 80 men.
Whoa, okay,
And anyway, to make the story short, the fellow outside, after introducing himself to us, talked to us, and I said, what the hell are we here for? He said, the army moved out, the German army moved out maybe 5 hours ago. And he said, they took everything. There was no food, there was nothing here. They even took the medicines. And he said, this is a hospital, as you can see.
wow.
And I said, oh my God. I said, well, is there enough to take care of immediately, the medical stuff? I said, doctors here? No, there's no doctors here. I thought, whoa, boy, this is rough. Well, they couldn't afford to leave them. I could see their pressure point.
Yeah,
And so anyway, I'm not gonna go through the big routine. The first thing I did is I told Gitz was my truck driver. He was also my general man. Gitzig could do everything.
oh, good,
Gitzig was unbelievable. And I said, well, first we gotta make arrangements for food. And I said, apparently we're going to have to get a doctor sooner or later, so we'll have to try to get a doctor in here if that's possible. First, tell them clearly that we're safe. There's nothing gonna happen here.
Yeah.
They're gone and they're anxious. I said, there's a lot of wounded men laying around out here. I said, we're looking at the ones that can stand up. How about the rest?
yeah,
It was a big, it was a hospital.
wow,
And, or at least a building being used as a
Yes.
hospital. And so anyway, that got straightened out. You know, there's no sense going into that. You can
Yeah.
figure
yeah,
everything out. But there was no food. I had enough food for 9 guys. I thought, we can't even share it because we've got to have food.
yeah,
You know, anyway, it was fortunate because Gitzig, he could find anything that was needed. He must have had, you know, we talked about this. I said, Gitz, I said, in no time at all. I said, we had vehicles coming. He said, yep. He said, Sarge, that's what I do.
oh my goodness, oh, how memorable,
Oh, he was fantastic.
Where was he from?
So anyway, to make a long story short, some vehicles showed up
Good.
within an hour or so, bringing medical supplies and food. And they even, gosh, I don't know how they did it, but they even had food coming in to be prepared. And I said, there are a hell of a lot of men here,
Yeah,
you know. Oh, but the food came in, Lynn, and, you know, it was a matter of getting them squared up, but that's what they wanted us to do. They were all
Yeah.
prisoners,
Yeah.
obviously. Here was, I think I had 9, if I remember. Anyway, you know, I just, I thought to myself, 9 against, God knows, over
Yeah,
100,
yeah.
this isn't good.
This is the ratio. But when you think of in a place of war, that humanitarian, being human and doing humanitarian Geneva Convention, whatever it is, to take as prisoners, but as human beings as well. I mean, that's That's,
You bring up a very interesting point, because obviously, we were not combat, that is my group, we're not combat. We got into it once or twice, not because we wanted it, but
Mhm.
because we were told everything was clear, and it
Wasn't.
wasn't. But I lost some men because of that, but there's nothing you can do. I mean, you've got to move forward the best you can, and it's not always
yeah,
totally perfect.
right,
But anyway, no, they, at the hospital, as I say, they came in and they moved in, and that made us virtually useless for them. I mean, we climbed poles.
Yeah, yeah.
We didn't fix broken arms.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you have those situations, but it was one that we always smiled about. There were many others that came in, but we, fortunately, we were lucky. Only one other time that was joking, because when we when we went to gosh, I'm trying to think of the name, forgets me. It was a railroad depot, a big one, and we were told to get there and get communications going.
This was within Germany?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there were train cars there, everything in this place. And the orders that were thrown in my face was, get all those wires up on top of those poles. They had cut all the wires down.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the poles were 100 feet high.
No.
Yes, I looked at those and I thought, I'm in no hurry to get up there.
Oh, your shimmying skills must be.
Well, we have what we call hooks.
Okay.
And, you know, it was an arrangement you tie on your leg.
All right,
And
so,
there's a big steel.
okay.
It's a steel sticking out.
Okay,
And so if you went up, it was easy to use. You could go up and
Okay.
down the pole with a hook.
okay.
You see, in those days, the telephone poles were built. They didn't have a hook in France. They had a hoop that
Oh,
came around.
yeah,
And it had an opening in it, and you put your fin in there, and then you put down.
okay.
But now you're stuck, because it's a
Yeah.
nuisance to move up and down the
Right,
pole
yeah.
fast like this. But you know, we could almost run up and down
Wow.
poles. And with the loops that the French people had, it was,
Yes.
you know,
I have a question. All right, you're doing your job, you're putting the wires back up 100 feet in the air. Are there planes going over? I mean, are you feeling like a sitting duck for, you know, for aircraft and bombing?
after you've been there a while, you don't even, it takes a while to get into it. There is a book that I read since the war. It is about the Civil War in this country. And a young man is there. And they move down into the trenches. They know that there's an enemy from the south coming in. And the young man looks out there, and he's in a spot that's been designated, not a very good one, but there. And the name of the book will come to me. You'll know it instantly, having been in the library. Anyway, the young man is there, and suddenly he's looking there, and he's not totally with himself. And as the enemy comes on, he drops his equipment and he runs back away from this. When he gets, now this is a book, it's a story,
Yeah.
it's not true, and
Yeah.
yet I'll bet it.
Well, yeah.
So when he goes back, there is a battle, and for some reason, when he gets back at night, some of the guys, the battle is over, and we didn't win, it was just a continuous thing. And when he gets back, he notices the guys are there, he says nothing to them, says nothing at all to them. He's ashamed of himself at this point, that he ran. So the following day, they are still in the same spot, looking at the same enemy. Strangely enough, he puts himself together and he goes back. And he goes into the lines to fight. And this is something that, in talking to men who were in the infantry, I've never had that experience, thank God. But that book always impressed me. It's a library book, it's a very common book.
Yeah.
We could get the name, someone up there could probably tell us. Oh God, what was the name of that book? Anyway, it's a very outstanding book, but it defines what is happening in the average person. Some are able to ride through it and they make it all okay. This man ran back, ashamed of himself. The following day he went back and he fought.
Made it right.
Like the rest. But it's something that many, many men, if not thousands of men, didn't go through this. Do I run? Do I stay? And I guess, thank God, the majority stayed.
Yeah.
You know, because we won.
When you know, it's been called that your generation is the greatest generation. You went through so much in World War II. There was so much that was asked of people, you know, economically, emotionally, in war, and so on. What do you want people to know who haven't served or didn't live in that time? How would you look back on your life and your service at that point in history? What do you want us to know?
The book is The Red Badge of Courage.
The Red Badge, okay, the Red Badge of
You've
Courage.
heard of it.
Yes, absolutely.
As I say,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
97,
Yeah.
it comes,
Yeah.
but not right away. Now, what you're saying is,
I mean, for people who did not live and go to war in World War II,
you know,
what would you like us to know about what it was like, when you came back from that experience, how it shaped your life?
I can answer that very rapidly. From what I had been through personally. When I was released from the service, I wound up in Massachusetts. Anyway, it's part of something. You see, this is when the war ended. We thought we knew we had enough points to come home.
Oh, yes.
Because we landed like, I think it was the fifth or sixth day of the battle. Not day one, okay? And we landed at the worst one, Omaha Beach, which was probably the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we got through that. But I think what I could say there is they put us on trucks once we went up the beach and climbed past where the heavy battle had
Yes.
been, a terrible spot. By the way, it was totally clean. To look at the beach, you would never know there had been a battle there. And the men who were torn apart and killed, you would not know it. Well, there's what they call, as a group that do this job. How they do it day in and day out, I don't know. But anyway, with their equipment, these men go in and they struck the area. And if you didn't know there was a big heavy battle there, you would never know it.
I had no
But
idea.
Graves, I think it was called Graves.
Okay.
But anyway, we were heading away, and of course there was no battle there when we landed. But when we were heading away, we were in trucks. And I remember one of the guys shouting, "Look, there's a battle going on." There were some airplanes were tangling each other up there. They were way up. It was hard, and without binoculars, it was hard to tell who was who. But this went on, and then suddenly somebody screamed. No one ever admitted to it, because anyway, somebody screamed, "Remember, all that stuff that's being shot up has got to come down on top of us. I'm getting off this truck." That was not an order from me. So we jumped off the truck like a bunch of idiots.
Oh, my goodness.
But that only lasted. And then I said, "Come on, guys, get back on that truck. We got places to go. You can't do this."
All right, I want to stop for 1 minute. I loved when you were talking about your driver and how important. Is there any other person that you served with that sticks out as being memorable that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, you gotta remember, I was 20, and suddenly I had, coming out of basic, suddenly I'm a sergeant, and there were other guys, they're older than me, and I was called in and told that you're gonna get your last strike. It's yours as of tonight. You are now a sergeant. Okay. And I remember the captain that was talking to me. He said, he said, one of the reasons we selected you is you have a good attitude to these things. And he said, most of the guys don't seem to hate you. You seem to be getting along with them. Well, these are problems, because you've got to have men who will work as a unit. In fact, the way I saw it, if I fall off a pole, they keep right on going as if nothing happened, because they got a job to do and there's a time limit on it. You've got to move. You don't sit and dream about it. And I had discussions with the guys, and I said, look, I said, this is not political. I said, they brought me in because there's a lot of things I know that most of you probably don't. I said, I have my own station, etc., as I've told you. And I said, however, we've got to work together. And I said, I've heard stories of this doesn't go. And I said, so please, I said, let's all think about one thing. We got a job to do, but let's let the personalities go. I said, every darn one of you probably could be a leader and everything would be fine, but they decided to pick me. And I said, so you're stuck with me. And there was just one or two holdouts. One guy in particular, I remember we were in Toccoa, Georgia, basic, and that's where we were at this time. And this was pretty much toward the end of basic, and there were a couple of guys there. We were discussing things of this nature, and we all started, we were in a barracks. It was very unique. I must say this, every man in my barracks except me was Jewish.
Really, is it?
And when Yom Kippur came
Yeah.
up, the guys all got dressed to go. They had a day off, and they looked at me, and I was just sitting on my bunk. And they said, Bill, come on, because we were pretty together. They said, come on, for God's sake, you didn't even get a shower. I said, when you're going, I'll get a shower. But Bill, they said, come on. I said, I can't go. I said, if you check the board, you'll find out that I cannot go with you. Why? I said, because I'm not Jewish. They all said, in that case, we'll kill you.
Oh, my goodness. Now, do you think it was geography that there were, that there were so many Jewish people in your unit because they came from the same area, or, they came, they were drafted from the same area, or just, it was just, it just happened randomly?
No,
Why there were so many Jewish people in your?
okay, Huggins.
Yeah,
If you look, you will find that many Jewish names are related around an H.
okay,
And it just happened.
then
It
alphabetically.
was a freakish thing.
Okay,
Because when we, they talked about it, and they just assumed, hey, we got another Jew.
oh, interesting.
And I never went to
Yeah.
to shul with them
Yeah.
or anything, and it was never brought up, except that one day, and they all said, well, okay, Bill, see you.
All right, what, in your career and your civilian life after the war, after you were, out of the army, do you think that that service gave you a life foundation that you carried with you?
Before you jump to that, let's hold off,
Okay,
because there's a point of interest. We were toward the very end of the war. We'd been all over. I can show you a map to show you where we've been. We covered a lot of France, not all of it, obviously. And we were about 60 kilometers out of Berlin, at the very end. And everyone was there. I mean, there was nothing you could name that wasn't there. And we stopped, and we didn't move. And there was a point brought up at that point. They decided that we weren't going to go in. They were going to let the Russians in, which they did. And we didn't get to Berlin, not at all. It was all taken care of.
yeah.
But it was frustrating for us because we're 60 kilometers or so
away,
out of that damn place, and we're going to go in and that'll be it.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't happen either. But I mean, these are just thoughts that were going through my head
Yeah.
because I'd forgotten about a lot
Yeah,
of these
yeah.
things, frankly. But
When
we got back, we figured, okay, they moved us back not very far. Because we had tanks, the equipment there was unbelievable. It was a huge movement on our parts.
Yeah.
And they just said, nope, you're not going in.
How did you find out the war was over, and where were you?
Well, that right there, we
Right there,
knew.
okay,
You see, right there, we knew that they were
Imminent.
coming up to
Yeah.
the very end of this whole
Yeah.
show. So anyway, once the war was over, I mean, we were told eventually that there'll be no more, we're not moving any further, we're gonna go back. And that told us right away what, apparently they didn't define everything that day.
Okay.
It was things we had to figure for ourselves. But we went back, and they moved us, in particular, our battalion was moved down to Marseille, France. That was because that's where the big boats left
okay.
to go home.
All right, and so,
And we had the points and everything
Yeah.
was fine, and we were very happy. We'd been sitting there a few days, maybe a week. And we were waked up very early one morning, 6 in the morning. And we figured, okay, I guess we're headed for the boat. They've told us that's our boat down there.
yeah,
And to make a long story short, they lined us up, and there was a colonel we hadn't seen before. And to make a long story short, he started telling us what a great group of guys we've been, and one thing and another. And I mean, we're getting a little concerned. This is not.
Like you're too valuable and you're not going home? Uh-oh.
They said, in checking, we find that this particular battalion, the 38th, has done a marvelous job with a minimum of casualties. And it has been decided that you're going to be honored
Operative word honored.
with help. We're going to put you on a different ship, which is now standing there. And you will be going to Pacific. And I'll tell you, each one of us could have
Oh my
dropped on the floor and said,
goodness.
oh my God. So anyway, and of course you didn't speak out of turn.
No.
And anyway, sure enough,
Now, what month was this? This was April of 44?
well, I'd have to look
Okay.
that up. I don't,
The
it
ship
had to
is
be-
there.
It had to be summer, like September,
Oh, okay,
that we were there.
okay.
No, it had to be later than September. I'm trying to get the time element involved and going from one
Right.
to the other. Anyway, we arrived out there, and it was, ye gods. That's a good question.
All right.
I'm trying to figure this
Yeah.
out.
All right, so you're in Marseille, the ship is there, they're sending you to the Pacific. Did you get all that way?
Oh, yes, oh, no,
Okay.
we went
You-
through
and
the
where did-
Panama Canal, the whole routine.
Whoa, and
But
where
I-
did you end up?
We ended up at Anahuac, which was a small island.
Yeah,
In fact, if I remember correctly, that is where they fired off the first atomic bomb.
oh,
When we
really?
tested it, I believe that
Oh.
was done at Anahuac.
Okay,
Anyway, we were there, and then eventually, we would have been moved in, to where we were headed.
okay. In 1945, when
Yeah.
you were coming back
Yeah,
into
well,
the
we-
States?
See, we went through the Panama Canal.
Okay.
On that trip.
When you were
And
headed
from
to the
there, of course,
Pacific.
we went out to Anahuac, and then eventually wound up at Okinawa.
Yeah,
And Okinawa, we were there 9/1/45.
Right.
Yep. And that was the end of our trip.
yeah,
We were there for a while, doing nothing. And we were there during one of the worst storms they've ever had.
like monsoon?
Yes.
Yes,
It was interesting because we huddled in the tents. There were 14-man tents.
yeah.
And we huddled in those things, and it was just coming down in buckets. And strangely enough, I've forgotten, a lot of this is coming back. It was during the night, and you could hear thump, 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 thump. That meant the wind coming in was crossing the top of the tents.
Okay.
And we were counting them. There was nothing else we could do. And then you would hear, it started at seven tents where I was. And then somebody said, I only hear 6. A little later, I only hear 5. And guys are coming in saying, can we get in there with you
Because they're
guys?"
collapsing?
The wind was slowly taking all the tents down.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
it finally wound up, a whole section were in one tent.
It was a little close quarters.
And then one of the guys said, I got a better place than this damn tent. He said, you know how they bury the people out here? There's a hole and you can go into it and they place the bodies in there.
Oh,
And some of the guys said, that's where I'm gonna go. I said, well, are you sure this is a good idea doing that? He said, if the last tent falls, where are you gonna go?
wow.
So, we wound up in various holes. You could get one or two
Protected.
guys in a hole, but at least it was dry.
At least it was dry.
They
All right,
said-
people have talked about the need of dry socks on their feet. Did you remember?
Critical. No, it's critical.
It's critical.
Oh,
Yeah.
you've got to have dry socks.
Yeah.
And if it's winter time, you gotta have some form
Yeah.
of glove,
Right.
something,
Okay.
something. Because you can't function with your dry socks, for instance. If your feet get wet, you're on your way to troubles.
Yeah.
Especially if the temperature drops. And so, yes, you usually have a pair of socks jammed in your pocket or whatever. And it's, because you can take a wet sock out and eventually dry it someplace
Yeah.
over a fire.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're lucky, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
I've seen the socks burn right up.
All right, Bill, I have to ask you one final question. Okay, and I'd like to end our interviews with this question. What do you want people to know about serving your country, especially in a time of war, what do you want them to understand about that? If they haven't had
Well, I had
that
a
opportunity.
strong feeling about it, because you see, I enlisted. I left college and I enlisted. There were the three of us that did that. You're young. I think the greatest thing about this is, if you have the feeling that you can enlist, you have to have that feeling. It's something that's in your own mind. Maybe as there were three of us that did this, you just decide, yes, this is great. I can stay here. I'm in the reserve and everything. But something inside you says, I gotta go. I gotta go. A lot of people think you're stupid. Maybe you were, but the three of us, we just decided we gotta go. And the dean wasn't happy when we informed that we were leaving. He just said, you'll be welcome back, when you come back. But you just get that feeling. It's hard to define what it means, because a lot of people say war is a waste of time. Yes, it is. It is. Because when you're all done, you're still lost. People are bragging so much about winning, but think what happens when the war is over. People are gone, homes are gone, cities, towns are gone. Everything is gone. For many people, their entire life possessions are gone. And that's the kind of thing you kind of fall back on. And I don't know. There were times when I said to myself, you're a damn fool for having signed up for this. But it's life, it's what you do. And I'm not saying that we're heroes, it's just, you get that feeling, I gotta go, I gotta go. And then, well, it's the same when a young man marries a woman.
Yeah.
You think he's not saying to himself, I hope I'm making the right judgment?
That's, all right, when people say to you, Bill Huggins, thank you for your service, how do you react to that?
I accept it, yes, it was good service. I wasn't looking for thank yous at the time, because I'll tell you something that it did which was of the greatest value to me. I changed from a boy to a man. And I only did that because I went out into the service and really saw things that you don't really think about. Pictures and books are nice, but if you're there, you understand, you really understand. I mean, what you see, I'm not going into any of the things I saw, not at all. I don't wish to.
Right.
It took me a good 3 months to wash everything away. Coming home on the ship to Seattle, by the way, we wound up in Seattle.
Seattle, oh my God, so yeah. You took...
Christmas Eve.
Oh, wow.
And I wish I could tell you what happened. They let us off the ship. We had to come back at night, not to the ship, but to
Yeah.
quarters. But the skipper on the ship wanted to be home. And you could not go on outside on the decks, not at all. The reason? He had a huge sail set up there, and he wanted to be home with his wife for Christmas.
Oh.
And by golly, he made it.
Oh, good for
He
him.
made it. It was a rough ride.
Oh.
But the waves, there were a lot of waves and things, but there was little much you could do. But he brought,
He
that
brought
was-
you in.
and the orders were, you do not go on deck. Because if you get swept overboard, there's
There-
no way we could find you.
Yeah.
So forget it. You know, just don't go out,
Just go. just-
except
yeah.
under certain circumstances. But then they only wanted crew to do
Yeah,
that, because
yeah.
they knew what to do. We didn't.
Yeah,
But it was the interesting thing, you know. There were so many little anecdotes you could talk
Yeah.
about. And over 70 years, I've kind of lost
Well,
them.
it has been such a pleasure to have this time with you. Thank you so much, Bill. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.
Good.